The silent caller. I never believed in paranormal things, at least not until the phone calls started. At first, they were just strange. A ringing that would echo through the quiet of the night, only to be followed by silence when I picked up. No voice, no sounds, just eerie, unsettling silence. I thought it was a prank, maybe a wrong number, and ignored it. But then they began to get worse. The calls kept coming, each one at random times, but always during the dead of night. I'd wake up to my phone ringing, the screen lighting up with an unknown number flashing across it. The silence was suffocating, the kind of silence that clung to the air and filled the room with a growing sense of dread. I'd hang up, my heartbeat racing, yet every time I tried to sleep, I felt watched. One night, after the call stopped ringing, I heard something else. A faint breathing, slow and labored, on the other end of the line. I gripped the phone tighter, my hands trembling. Then, just as I was about to speak, I heard it. A whisper, barely audible. "I'm right outside your door." Frozen in fear, I stared at the door, my pulse thundering in my ears. It was too dark to see anything, too quiet to hear anything more. But that voice, those words, stayed with me. I didn't know if I should open the door, check outside, or lock myself in. But I did nothing, not a single movement. I was too scared to breathe. The calls continued every night. Each time, the whispers grew louder. "I can see you. I'm getting closer. You can't hide from me." I began locking all the windows, checking the locks on my doors, even pulling the curtains closed before I went to bed. But nothing helped. The calls kept coming. I thought about changing my number, but the feeling, that overwhelming sense that someone was out there, wouldn't go away. It was as though the calls were just a warning. It wasn't the phone that haunted me. It was the silence between the calls, the feeling that something, someone, was always waiting. One evening the call came again, but this time there was no whisper, no breathing, just a soft, almost peaceful voice saying, "I'm inside." I turned toward the door, and before I could move, it slowly creaked open. The shadows in the hallway. I live in an old house, one of those grand, creaky places with narrow hallways and too many rooms. It's always felt quiet, almost too quiet at times. I never minded the silence, though. It made the place feel peaceful. That is, until I started hearing footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. The floorboards were ancient, and they creaked at night. But after a few nights of hearing the same soft thudding sounds, footsteps moving down the hallway outside my bedroom door, I knew it wasn't the house. It was someone. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The footsteps always came late at night, just as I was about to fall asleep. At first, they were distant, barely audible, but each night they grew louder, closer. The sound of slow, deliberate steps, as if whoever it was waiting for me to notice. I'd jump up, heart pounding, and check the hallway, but there was never anyone there. Nothing but darkness. It felt wrong. I started locking my door at night, but the footsteps never stopped. One evening, after hearing the usual sounds, I decided I had enough. I grabbed a flashlight, determined to confront whatever or whoever was lurking in the hall. I stepped into the hallway, the beam of the flashlight trembling in my hand. The house was eerily still, and yet the air felt charged with something dark. The footsteps echoed once again, right outside my door. I spun around, shining the light down the hall. Nothing. No one. I took a deep breath, my pulse racing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows. I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid, but then I heard it again. A whisper. Soft, low, and chilling. "Come closer." The voice was muffled, as if coming from inside the walls themselves. It wasn't from the hallway, it was coming from the room behind me. I whipped around, the flashlight beam landing on my bedroom door. I froze. It was slightly ajar. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I stepped closer. I pushed the door open with shaking hands. The room was empty, nothing unusual, except for the feeling that the space was colder. The air felt thick, like it was closing in on me. Then, the door slammed shut behind me. I turned, heart hammering in my chest, and before I could react, a dark shape darted across the room. And that's when I saw them, the faint outline of a figure standing in the corner of the room, watching me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed with fear as I stared at the shadow in the corner, realizing I wasn't alone in the house anymore. The Watcher in the Shadows. It started with a strange feeling, a tingling sensation at the back of my neck, like someone was always behind me. I shook it off, thinking it was just my imagination. That is, until the notes began appearing. I found the first one on my doorstep. It was simple, scribbled in black ink. "I see you." My heart pounded. I lived alone. Who could have left this? I checked the yard, but there was no sign of anyone. Maybe it was just a prank. I threw the note away, telling myself it meant nothing. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next night, I heard scratching at my window. I froze, heart racing, too scared to move. I peered through the blinds, but saw nothing, just the empty street. The scratching stopped, and I tried to convince myself it was an animal, maybe a tree branch against the glass. But then the second note came. "I'm closer than you think." This time I didn't throw it away. I tucked it into my drawer and locked the door. I couldn't stop thinking about it, wondering who was watching me and how they were getting so close without me noticing. The following night, I decided to confront it. I stayed up, keeping the lights off, waiting. My eyes darted to every shadow, every corner. Nothing happened. I almost felt foolish for worrying. But then, as I turned to check my phone, I saw it. Movement, just beyond the corner of my vision. A figure, standing motionless in the darkness outside my window. I couldn't make out their face, but I saw the outline of their body, as if they were waiting for me to notice. My blood ran cold. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stood there, paralyzed in fear. I grabbed my phone and ran to call the police, but before I could press the number, the lights flickered. And then came the soft whisper, right behind me. "I've been watching you for a long time." I turned around. No one was there, but I could hear the heavy breathing, like someone was standing just inches away. That's when I realized it wasn't the first time. It had been happening for months. The Watcher had been right beside me, always just out of sight. And now, they were closer than ever.